when you're talking about large data set or running randomized control trial, that itself, you can't go without proper research training, because studying medicine is a completely different skill from doing research. And so just because you are a great doctor doesn't mean you're a great researcher. And people who really want to go into a career like full-time academics, getting grants, they need either a master's or PhD. So you don't have to do all at the same time. I would say start with the medical school first. You can even join a few projects with your mentors. Sometimes they are research mentors that has been assigned to you. If not, get started with a clinical case report first, case series. That's a good way to get started.
Welcome to the Prospective Doctor Podcast, brought to you by Med School Coach. Pre-med and medical students alike are encouraged to tune in each week for tips on how to become a strong med school candidate, gain acceptance into the school of your dreams, and succeed on your journey toward residency and becoming a doctor.
Good morning or afternoon, whatever time you guys are listening. It is Dr. Erkeda here with another fantastic guest, Dr. Jia Ng. I'm just going to give her an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to medicine.
Hi, thank you so much, Dr. Erkeda. I am Dr. Jia. I am an assistant professor at Zucker School of Medicine, a nephrologist. But my journey started less shaky. It was a lot more shaky than this. To start off with, I did my medical school at Penang Medical College, which is a twinning program between Malaysia and in Ireland. Then after graduation, I became an intern. I did a few years and then also served in a rural area before coming to the U.S. to do residency. And then after a few years, residency, chief residency, did fellowship, and finally now I'm an attending and also I would say full-time researcher, 75% researcher and 25% clinician.
That is an amazing journey. And I know that a lot of our listeners may have questions about transitioning from different healthcare systems and things like that. So I love your story. Can you share a little bit more about how research is important and how those who may be interested in getting into research can gain opportunities regardless of what level they're at?
Great question. So to research, there are many levels. Some people think research means, okay, you have a publication that counts. And some people are like, no, I need to be the principal investigator. I need to be running my own lab. So depending on the level, we can go in at different stages. So for people who are in medical school or resident, I think a low-hanging fruit, just get started, is something like case reports. Writing a case report out, because you are still moving science forward. Other people are learning from your case and you're showing some unusual presentation, unusual diagnosis, and other clinicians can learn. So that's still moving science, but it's not generalizable because there's only one patient. And then as you start moving up, when you're talking about large data set or running randomized control trial, that itself, you can't go without proper research training, because studying medicine is a completely different skill from doing research. And so just because you are a great doctor doesn't mean you're a great researcher. And people who really want to go into a career like full-time academics, getting grants, they need either a master's or PhD. So you don't have to do all at the same time. I would say start with the medical school first. You can even join a few projects with your mentors. Sometimes they are research mentors that has been assigned to you. If not, get started with a clinical case report first, case series. That's a good way to get started.
For students who may already be wanting to have a full-time research career before even entering medical school, do you recommend that they pursue MD, PhD programs, or should they have the opportunity to try it out once they're in medical school and add it on?
Yeah. So there are pros and cons for each. People who are, when you're so set, MD, PhD will be the fastest, because now when you do PhD, you have a little bit of clinical background. So you know when I'm doing my PhD, what I need to focus on. If you're only doing a PhD without a medical degree and you do all your master's first, you don't have that clinical context. So the way you think is a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Now, whether to do PhD later that's also a good opportunity, because think about it this way. When you get into certain fellowship programs, if you are American citizen or green card holder, certain universities will pay. They have grants to pay for your master's. Like I did my research fellowship, and so my master's was paid for, and I don't have to pay anything. So you have to think about the financial too. Just because I do a medical degree doesn't mean that I can't do my master's later. If it can be paid, that's for by other people, that's even better.
I love that, because a lot of times we all talk about the magnitude of debt that a lot of people get with their medical education training. I know that different countries have different systems for how medical school and upper level college and things are paid for. But here in the US, it's pretty expensive for most people. So it's really good to think about what avenues you want to pursue and then how you can get other people to fund it, especially like utilizing your skill sets.
Absolutely. I want to add on a little bit, one more piece to it. And then sometimes after the MD, people think, should I go for master's versus PhD? So it depends on the type of research you do. If you're doing, biochemistry, those type of basic science, then maybe PhD may be necessary. But for a lot of us are doing clinical research, master's is probably good enough. And it's nice to have a nice PhD behind, but think about the time lost. Mm-hmm. Every year you delay, the longer time means you haven't published paper, the longer means you haven't even started your first grant, you haven't even seen a patient. So think about the opportunity cost as well. If you don't need all the way there, then you don't have to. But if your career trajectory needs that degree, that PhD, then yes, go for it.
Yes, I definitely love that advice. And you bring up a good point, because there are different ways to implement utilizing research in your everyday life. So like you mentioned, you're a clinical researcher and you still see patients, whereas there are some people who may work for a pharmaceutical company or a contract research organization or some of these other clinical trials companies that are popping up in health tech, or even working for different things. Like one of my classmates from college did a biology degree with me, but she ended up going and getting a PhD in marine science, and she works in cosmetics. So there are so many different avenues that you can use to implement research and actually make a difference.
Wonderful. Great point. Great point.
So a lot of our listeners are at the phase right now where they're working on their applications, they're doing interviews. That stuff is kind of wrapping up because we're about to go into the match process. But for those students who may be entering the match next year and things like that, is research really important to match into residency?
Oh, this is a question I get the most. It depends on the how competitive your residency is and where you're from. So let's go with the most competitive first. If you are going into a very competitive residency, orthopedic or like orthopedic residency or dermatology and even plastic, they have so many applications that they need to weed people out. And research publication is one way to weed people out. Even plastic surgery, you may end up not doing any research, but what they want to see is the transferable skills. So when you do research and complete a publication, it shows that you are a finisher. It shows that you are that sort of person who can handle more than just medicine. You can handle quite a few projects, or you can handle team building, because when you do a project, you're working with different people. So they use these quality. The publication is a surrogate for what they think the type of person you are, not the actual paper itself. So yes, for very competitive, publication is a must. Now let's go to less competitive fellowship. If you are going to a community program, that typically no, especially for international medical graduate. What program directors, their biggest fear is you come in, you don't know the system, they have to coach you. They get into 4 months and you haven't even on board. You don't know how to see a patient yet. That is their biggest fear. So research is really, they like it, but they want you to know the US system. So if you want to prioritize clinical observership versus research, I would say do as much clinical observership, get more letter of recommendation. That is even more important than a publication from your home country.
I love that advice. And you make a lot of great sense, because a lot of times we know that you have limited time, you have to study, you have to take your boards, you have to learn the system and learn how to see patients. So they don't expect you to have 17 publications by the time you're a fourth year medical student. But a lot of these skills, like you said, are transferable, and seeing if you can start something and finish it, if you can follow up, if you know how to methodically go through data and practice evidence-based medicine. So that can be transferred in a lot of different skills. So I wouldn't do things just to check boxes. Of course, if you have an interest, do it. If you have an opportunity, do it. But say you want to lead one of your interest groups and you've been doing that for a few years and you've gone from being secretary to president and you've done community service, or you dance after or practice music for students. Do what brings you joy, because medicine is going to be there. And a lot of these things that we do to boost our application are great, but there are many ways to showcase that you have certain transferable skills.
Absolutely. And don't think that getting into the resident, that's an end all be all, because your career is 30, 40, 50 years. Like I had a terrible score for USMLE Step 1 because my intention was to go to Australia, different countries, and the last minute, you know what, I'm going to jump ship and go to the US. Did not even realize how important USMLE Step 1 was. So did not score well, did not match the first time around, had to match the second time, and then went to community. It's like you crawl up and you grab hold of whatever opportunity comes, and then you do your best in that new opportunity. And so just because you don't do well, don't match into your ideal program, doesn't mean that you can't be successful, because now, after years later, wow, these sort of experience build my character. I learned rejection. I learned, because rejection is so common in research. So all this rejection is what I've like the thick skin. You've built the thick skin on handling paper rejections as well.
But what you were saying was you learned so much from your experiences. And I love your transparency, because a lot of times we have our guests on the show, and a lot of guests are kind of where you want to be. Like, we're attendees, we're telling you about our journey so that you can pick our brains or learn something from us and pick something up from here that may help you. But what we must realize that medicine, life, it's a journey, and there are ebbs and flows, and there are little like shockers and things like that. So everybody doesn't match on the first time. That doesn't mean you're not a great doctor or not a great clinician. Everyone doesn't do great on standardized tests. That doesn't mean that you don't know how to see a patient and take care of them and have empathy and treat them. So there are pieces on your journey that make you who you are and make you more of a human being and a person. So I appreciate that transparency. I wish we would have taken some time and talked about like why you chose to come to the US instead of Australia, because that's really interesting to me.
Right. Yeah. If you have time, we can definitely dive into that deeper.
Yeah, I'm going to make time for that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You want me to answer that now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, first it was the exam. Second, it was the opportunity. After looking, I knew I was talking to people. That's one key point. When you like to join a program, and we always have this idealized, you imagine how it's like, but sometimes in reality, it's not. What you really need to do is to talk to the people who are on the ground, how things are. Then I hear, oh, what happens? How do you become a consultant? How do you become an attending? Then I learned that you have to go to all different states to do different rotation. You have to figure out your own rotation. You have to do this. And then research wasn't a big thing. So I don't want that. I want the fastest path. I want a structured path. I want that when I'm done, I know I am well trained. I don't want to be in a bind because I did not pick the right rotation, or I did not get the right rotation just because I don't know the Australian system well. Mm-hmm. So I decided, you know what, I think just knowing the US opportunity and standard of care, I want to learn from the best. And that's why I decided to change.
That's an awesome story. And I think that's also transferable here. So a lot of times it's very important when you have your your mind's set on this key program or this key school and you've read everything about it and it's on the top US ranked list, even though a lot of schools are removing themselves from the list now. It's okay to figure out what you want and not what's necessarily big top news. So talking to other students and other residents to see what their experience is, seeing what your interests are and if they align with what's offered by those programs, if it gives you the opportunity to go where you think you want to go at this point in time now. So a lot of that is important with networking and things like that. So I appreciate you sharing that story. My final question for you, since you've looked into a lot of different health systems and been into looking at the U.S. healthcare system, we know that it's not perfect. There's a lot of opportunity for growth. If you had a magic wand and you could change anything about healthcare, what would you change?
What I think is the health IT system, how interoperability, the interoperability of health IT is really important. Mm-hmm. It's because if you think about it right now, what really helps is data. You can think of all the Facebook, Meta, everything they are collecting data so that they can target you to sell things to you. But in healthcare, what we can think about is how can we get all this information and give precision medicine. We can give the right medicine to you, not like a bunch of people and only maybe one person. It works for one people. You want as much data as possible. That's one thing. And second, the more connected the data is, the better. Because if I am an inpatient, I get discharged, I don't have to find the discharge summary. Everything is sent over. And then the outpatient doctor knows what happened in the hospital. And then it's even better if we can connect the inpatient, outpatient, and caregiver, the home situation, the social situation. That way, we can all target the intervention a lot more for a particular patient. Somebody needs more, some people needs less. So I think that's the biggest challenge. It's not easy because there's just so much data. There's so many different companies. Everybody's fighting for this pie. And I think there's also technological issues as well. So I think that's the biggest challenge. If I can, that would be the first thing I'll fix.
You're speaking my language. I won't even add to that. I'm sure that our listeners have heard me rant enough about how we need to utilize technology to actually help patients. So I appreciate all of your words of wisdom that you've shared with the audience. You've shared a bunch. And I'm sure that everyone will want to kind of like search you out to figure out how they can get involved in research. Now you have a wonderful website kind of navigating people and coaching people. So I want you to just tell us a little bit about that and where people can look that up and then how people can reach out to you if they have more questions.
All right. So because I love research so much, I started doing YouTube videos to help people who want to get into research, how to write, some of the basic things about academia and medicine. So check out my YouTube channel, and it's just at Published MD, like Published MD, or you can check out my website, www.publishedmd.com. So it's so good having you here, being your guest here with Dr. Erkeda.
Thank you so much. And I definitely appreciate you coming and sharing all your words of wisdom. And I'm sure we may have an opportunity to have you back and talk about more wonderful things in research. So you can definitely be a friend of the show. For all of the listeners out there, please click that subscribe button. Go and check out that YouTube and website. And then if you have any questions or any recommendations for future guests or any topics that you want to do, please reach out to me at Dr. D-O-C-T-O-R, the letter D, Graham, Dr. D Graham on Instagram, and DM me and we can see what we can do for you. Have a good day. Bye.
Each episode of the Prospective Doctor podcast is brought to you by Med School Coach. To access articles, videos, webinars, and free tools to help you succeed on your journey toward medical school and beyond, visit our website, prospectivedoctor.com. We hope you tune in again next time.